everyone, thank you for coming to our show. I am Shi-An. It was originally planned for my mother Tan Kheng to be physically present with me to deliver this segment. However, she was cast in a movie that is filming from May to June and unfortunately cannot be here. We are super happy for her, but as a result, here is our segment in video format. On the 29th of April 2015, from 7 p.m. to almost 11 p.m, I watched my mom, dad, Auntie Serene and a whole group of actors do a marathon play reading of Eleanor Wong's Mergers and Accusations, followed by Wills in Succession, and ending with Jointly and Severably. It left such an impression on me, not just because my parents were in it, but the words and the sentiment were so heartfelt and so vividly dramatized. And there was no real set, no showy lights, no sound effects, just a bunch of actors with their words and their characters playing out the drama of being in the margins and trying to belong in the 1990s. I can't fully say I relate to any of the issues of the characters, but I remember feeling very, very moved and crying non-stop. And now thinking back to the day, I still get goosebumps.
Mergers and Accusations was one of the best things I ever did in the 1990s, next to giving birth to you, of course. I was just starting to get serious about acting while holding down a full-time job, first at FJ Benjamin and then at Tanks. I was not professionally trained as an actor, and like Serene, I spent most of my time in sports during my school days. Anyway, I remember your dad and I were rehearsing at one of the rehearsal studios at Fort Canning Black Box back in the early 1993 when Kheng hailed us to his office and handed us a script which Eleanor Wong had just written. I'd known Elle for some time. We were both in the original Beauty World chorus. She had just written this play and Kheng wanted to do a reading of the draft. Kheng read the stage directions, I read Ellen To, your dad read Jonathan Chin, and I think, I'm not sure, Elle read Mary Okada and Leslie. We sat there and read the play cold, from beginning and to the end. And by the end, we were slobbering idiots. Really, we were. So drama, right?
Were you all crying because it was good or because it was bad?
Good. Very good. More importantly, none of us in that room had ever met any LGBTQ characters on stage that were so nuanced and so real. Ellen, Jonathan, Leslie, they were all composites of my great LGBTQ friends who had been invisible to Singapore and been hiding their true selves for years. I cannot tell you how life-changing it was for me to read those lines and to go through the conflicts and tensions Ellen was experiencing. And to do that with your dada playing opposite me was even more intense an acting and life experience. In 1993, that kind of what we now call representation was unheard of on the Singapore stage. I may have had no real training in theatre or acting, but I was all heart, life, and as much brains as I could muster, and I could tell this play was an important one to stage. We had no idea the sort of resistance a play like Mergers would encounter, and we were worried we would not get our license to perform it, or that it might get shut down midway through the run. But we did get to stage it, and it didn't get shut down.
Weren't you scared?
Of course! At that age, I would say I was very law-abiding. That we could be doing something that could be deemed as breaking the law petrified me. People always think we are fearless. We were not. We were often scared shitless. But the theatre was something so undeniable for us. We had to do it. And when you feel so strongly about saying something, you're willing to take the risk. Talking about risk, I had to smoke so many cigarettes as Ellen To in Mergers, and I did, okay, real cigarettes.
Do you miss it?
Smoking? No. Smoking on stage? Yes.
Auntie Serene said you were in Beauty World.
Yeah, I was in 2 Beauty Worlds. I got promoted from chorus girl Daisy to the lead female villain Lulu in the 1992 version. Not bad. Only took 4 years for me to fight to that spot.
Did you want to be in a musical?
I never saw myself as a singer. Sure, I can carry a tune, but to do a musical, I mean, you need special type of, a special type of voice, singing ability for that. But still, when I was offered the part of Lulu, I jumped at it. And we were like that in the 1990s. We just jumped off cliffs. We figured things out along the way on the job. I remember once during singing rehearsals of Beauty World when I couldn't hit the notes for one of Lulu's songs. And Dick Lee took over the rehearsal, and in just one session, he helped me hit the notes I needed by working my voice through my body and choreography. In that one session, he brought me from I can't do this to I can not only do this, I can do this night after night, show after show. And when Susan Sang gave me a good review in the Straits Times, I think I really started to believe I can do this theatre thing, this musical thing. Reviews are not everything, but that one really boosted my confidence.
I wonder what I would feel and what I would do if I was offered a lead in a musical.
We didn't know either, but we just went for it. We were such a tight community. Everyone looked out for everyone. There was a performance of Beauty World when Lulu had to perform her big number and my red sequin gown's strap burst. Wardrobe malfunction with a capital W and a capital M. And on the spot, the chorus boys in that number rallied around me and changed the choreo so they could take turns to help me hold my dress up. We did this for the entire 4-minute number. And by the time the song ended and we got into the wings, we were exhausted, but we laughed so hard. The stage manager was so angry at us. I learned a big lesson about acting that day, that there is great pleasure when you experience a lightness in acting. Don't be too precious about your acting. It's a kind of Milan Kundera quality. Very 90s, right? I ended the 1990s with another musical, Haunted.
Do you miss doing theatre?
You know, Shi-An, it wasn't doing theatre. It was a way of life. In 1994, I started doing TV for Masters of the Sea and then Troubled Waters. And the TV audience is so much more than that of the theatre, and so many more people got to see my work. But I still always went back to the theatre. It was truly bizarre. Everyone I knew in theatre had full-time 9-to-5 jobs. After work, we'd rush down to rehearsal, sometimes eating in the car, sometimes we'd buy food for each other, sometimes we'd eat when we get to rehearsals. We'd rehearse till 1, 2 a.m. and then we'd all go out for supper, laugh and talk a lot, go home at 3, 4 o'clock, and then we'd get up the next morning to go to work. And we do this same thing day after day. It was an obsession. From the outside, everyone thought we were mad, spending all this time and doing so much for next to no money. And I guess we were madly in love with the theatre. And for this group of actors and theatre makers coming together night after night, we made each other feel normal for wanting to do this. It was a delicious double life we all led. We were so energized. It was like we were all chasing this magic, creating worlds from nothing, constructing possibilities, and all of us were in it together. A bunch of crazy, creative, imaginative people. It was very character building. When I was asked to be part of a massive promenade performance called Longing in 1994, we were all part of a huge ensemble, going through long, hard hours of rehearsals together. So physically, mentally, and spiritually demanding some of these productions were. But the aesthetics, the sensorial feeling of taking over the entire Fort Canning Park and filling the space with bodies and the air with words, music, memories, it was all worth it. When the entire company slowly descended the stone stairs connecting the fort to Cox Terrace, everyone walking slowly for 10 minutes, the audience silent as they watched 15 actors making their way down the stairs. No one had ever seen anything like that in Singapore then. And I saw the value of being in something so big and wonderful. I discovered my place in the whole scheme of things. I loved being a part of the ensemble, a company.
Gosh, Mama, were you ever tired?
All the time, Shi-An. All the time. And like how I've just seen you tackling your first big role in a TV production, we just kept going and going because we love it. We can't help it. When I look back at the amount of work I was part of in the 1990s, it was really one production after another, for stage and for screen. Well, until you came along, really. But something happened during a tour to Cairo for Descendants of the Eunuch Admiral when I think, for myself, I came face to face with my own sense of utter depletion. You know me, I have a lot of stamina and I am known to keep going and going, but during that tour, I think something just snapped. There was depletion emotionally, physically, and mentally. I was exhausted. The obsession was starting to change shape, and I think I moved into self-preservation mode. And for the first time, I heard a voice inside me that said, "Time to rest, Kheng." And as luck would have it, Phua Chu Kang happened in 1997, and it was such an unexpected welcome change for me as an actor. And I found myself inadvertently spending more time on screen. And as it turned out, PCK lasted for 11 years. It's really quite amazing how we managed to even have children, right? Serene, Nelson, Oniatta. Well, I only have one. You, Shi-An. And you became a big priority.
Thank you. What was the first production you and Dada did together?
It was a restaging of an old 1964 play called The Moon is Less Bright by Gopo Singh. That was in November 1990. What a glorious experience. Everything was new and shiny, a new relationship with your dad, a growing relationship with the theatre, and a kind of optimism and deepening confidence in myself I associate with that production. That production connected me to history, to Singapore, and to my Chineseness. I was your typical English-educated, middle-class young woman with a very Western orientation of what it was like to be Chinese, to be a woman in Singapore, and all my affinities with the traditions I grew up with, my Asian roots, my love for my country and family. It all surfaced in that production. And it was so beautiful. I cannot tell you how beautiful that production was to me. The feeling, the experience, the production, what was going on in my real life, everything. King Sen brought so much wonderment and beauty into that black box in Fort Canning. And he transformed it time and time again. And for Moon, he brought earth and soil and wooden planks and created a modern sense of what village life was like in wartime Singapore and Malaysia. And I was in my element. Something opened up in me. A sense of country, a part of a movement, a great moment in my life. The critic at that time, Hannah Pandian, hated the production, but that didn't bother me too much because I was in a shroud of joy, pure joy. And that is what I hope for you, Shi-An. Joy. Pure joy.
Singapore is projected to have the lowest inflation rate in ASEAN in 1996 at 2.8%. Singapore's inflation in 1995 was also the lowest in ASEAN at 1.8%. The rise in inflation in Singapore between 1995 and 1996 was the highest in ASEAN. Singapore's rate of inflation went up by 1% compared to Brunei's 0.2% and Malaysia's 0.1%. All other ASEAN countries saw their inflation rates improve.
Singapore was ranked the 11th richest nation in 1995. Singapore did not make it to the list of top 10 richest nations in 1995.
Singapore's population has reached 3.6 million. Most are still kiasu.
Academics and property consultants say that the property market will not collapse. Big developers say otherwise. According to a survey, 50% of those polled say the market will collapse, while 50% say otherwise. 50% of property speculators predict that the market will collapse, while another 50% predict otherwise. The uncertainty has left many Singaporeans dazed and confused.
A TCS actor has been arrested for drunk driving. He was stopped along the ECP at 3 o'clock early last Sunday morning and arrested when he failed a breath analyzer test. The actor, who cannot be named for reasons I'm not supposed to say, won the Golden Star Award recently for acting as a drunk driver. The 26-part series, Whiskies on Wheels, features the relationship between a drunk driver and a news reader who reports on his drunk driving. The actor, who has been released on bail, has announced his engagement to me.
An Indonesian maid was taken into custody during the recent party at the Padang. Policemen Terence Tan and Chua Boon Chai escorted her to Beach Road Police Station after they found marks on her upper thigh, left buttock, and right breast. Police started getting suspicious when they noticed the maid climbing somewhere over the banner of the NDP rainbow. Her employer, businesswoman Doreen Tang, is still being questioned.
A 27-year-old insurance agent, Andrew Chan, was today sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Angela Tan, a 27-year-old marketing manager. The incident took place during a bungee jump at Sedili, Johor Bahru. Numbers of Singaporeans visiting Malaysia has been on the decline since early this year.
Cases of minor mental disorders is on the rise. The latest in a spate of psychiatric complaints involves 32-year-old Grace Chong, who after recurrent bizarre behavior was finally escorted to Woodbridge Hospital by her grandmother. A recent survey indicates that the family has to play a greater role in maintaining an individual's mental health.
10 people died and 17 others were injured when a brawl broke out between two rival all-girl gangs at a coffee shop at Yishun Street 21. The fight started after one gang member, Fan Chong, laughed at another gang member, Zoe Lay, for subscribing to M1 instead of Singtel. After discussing the merits of both and not being able to reach a consensus, beer bottles were used. 54 mobile phones were destroyed in the incident.
A one-day-old baby with a hole in his heart can lead a normal life after a grueling 27-hour operation. Head of the surgical team, Professor C.P.R. Radhagopa, has called the child hope. Singapore's economy will not be affected by his birth. Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping has died. Insiders say that he will be unable to go to Hong Kong to watch the handover ceremony. Singapore's economy will not be affected by his death.
A new study by 11 think tanks around the world has rated Hong Kong and Singapore the two freest economies worldwide. The study tracks 102 countries on 17 measures, including the freedom to open a bank account. International magazine The Economist wonders if the measures might be flawed. The 102 economies have been categorized according to truly free, free, mostly unfree, and repressed. Singapore and Hong Kong are truly free.
I really like this title. There is no future in nostalgia. Not only because I've always loved a good wordplay, but also because it taunts us to think, how then could nostalgia become valuable to us as we move into the future? Now, let's try to circle back to this question at the end of this presentation, but let's start by asking, why the 90s? In my conversations with Casey and Robin, we have come to realize that the 90s was an era where performing artists in Singapore were ferociously writing the rules. We dug ourselves up from the cultural desert that was before, and artists were creating and drafting the playbook of Singapore theatre. The 90s was also important to me. It was my formative years as a theatre artist. It was in the 90s that I learned some of the most important lessons and gained insights that made me what I am today. So now, what I hope to do today is to share two important lessons with you. Two important lessons that I've learned from two of the most important teachers in my artistic life. The late Guo Baokun. Guo Baokun was an actor, mostly director, playwright, and teacher. He was the founder and artistic director of Practice Performing Arts School and the Theatre Practice, formerly known as Practice Theatre Ensemble. He was also the founder of the Substation and the Theatre Training and Research Program. At times, he was called the Doyen of Singapore Theatre. Now, sometimes one may feel that too much has been said about Guo Baokun. Sometimes I feel that way too. But I think it's also interesting if I could share some personal anecdotes about him, especially when I realized I was fortunate to be among the last group of artists in my generation who had personally seen and worked with Baokun before he passed on. It was 2001, and I was a resident artist with the Theatre Practice straight after I graduated with a postgrad degree from London. It was late at night, and Baokun had just watched the full run of a play for a young audience that I had directed for the company. He had some comments. In fact, many comments. He mentioned a few crucial ones when I saw him at the foyer. I didn't immediately agree with what he said, but I nodded as I listened. He probably sensed my resistance, and so he did not continue with the comments but offered to give me a lift home. I declined, of course, not wanting to trouble him, but he said, "It's fine. It's a chance for me to get to know you better." During the ride, I was feeling like shit. A little discouraged, but mostly tired and burnt out. We did not talk about the play. Instead, Baokun asked me about how I felt so far working in the company and how it was being a full-time young theatre artist. I told him I felt fortunate and was really grateful that I was given a chance to work in the company, especially when I had a 5-year study loan to worry about. Now, some context here. A full-time theatre career in theatre, whether fully employed or as a freelancer, was not that common back then. And also, the NAC scholarship wasn't that focused on postgraduate studies back then. So back to the ride. After that, he started sharing his hopes and visions for the Theatre Training and Research Program, which was his new baby then. At that point, I drifted away a little, and when I came back, suddenly something came over me. And I said, "Guo Sheng," I call him Guo Sheng, "can I ask you something?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Have you ever thought about giving up?" He paused. And in that brief moment, I was thinking to myself, why did I ask that? I was probably looking for some kind of affirmation or encouragement to keep me going or to get me out of that shitty, burnt out feeling. And before I could go further, Baokun said, "Yes, sure, all the time. In fact, I wake up every morning thinking if I should give up doing what I do." I was a little taken aback. Every morning I asked. I guess it wasn't the response I was looking for. Then he said, "Yes, every morning. And then I have to make a decision. There are 2 options in front of me. 1, give up. 2, get up and carry on." When you see it that way, it becomes easier. Only 2 choices. The way to tackle the feeling of wanting to give up is to get up and carry on. At that point, I was thinking, wow, like that also can. What I'm trying to say, he continued, is that you are always making a decision. You always have a choice. And when you know that no one has put a gun to your head and forced you to do this or that, and that it is a choice you made, you are free. That I have made a choice, made a decision, and that I am free. Now, this irrational but highly effective way of thinking has been the power that motivates me since then. And I've also come to realize lately that this power and freedom that comes as a result of a decision are the roots of that pleasure that you feel deep in your heart when you create as an artist. has that shaped me. It is still hard, don't get me wrong. It is still hard to make art. But I've learned not to complain, not to blame anyone or the big environment when things are not ideal, not to speak ill of things or other people, and not to point fingers. The choice is in front of you. All you have to do is step up and make the decision. I'm grateful for this lesson. About a year and a half later, Bao Kun left us. It was different. It was different when you had to witness the fading of a great man at close range. It made you realize that greatness was not a given, but a choice. My dear William Teo. William Teo, director, sometimes actor, founder and artistic director of Asia in Theatre Research Centre, hairstylist, and salon owner. Actors who have worked with me may notice that I am very fond of talking about my experiences working with William Teo. Actors who have worked with him will probably all agree that his style of rehearsal and performance is indeed very memorable. His actors came from all walks of life. He wouldn't usually reject anyone who wanted to be in his play as long as they showed commitment. But once you lagged, you were out. And mind you, not thrown out by William. Usually it was the actor's choice because by that time, they would have realized how far away they were from the focus of the entire group. William was very focused. He knew what he was looking for, but at the same time, he was very open. During rehearsals, everyone could contribute ideas, and anyone could just go on stage and try things out, even if it's not your role. Actors can become musicians at certain times, musicians can become actors. Actors were helping other actors with costumes, and we took care of our own props. In fact, William emphasized the need for artists to keep learning and training. We practiced yoga, tai chi, meditation, we learned to play drums, bells, we ironed costumes, made props, worked with sound systems, lighting equipment, and boiled tea leaf eggs for the audience. We would sweep the stage. Yes, we would sweep the stage to ensure the audience seats were clean. We would pour drinks and invite the audience to stay there and chat with them about the play, about art and life, and listen to their comments. By now, some of you might have guessed where do the ensemble model, the drink and talk post-show dialogue sessions, and the emphasis on training at 9 Years Theatre come from, and why actors in my play are always seen moving set pieces. William loves to chat, and he loves a bottle of good wine. These were perfect reasons for rehearsals to flow into chill-out sessions at his place afterward. I remember, at one of such sessions, after a few glasses of wine, I was sharing my thoughts about how the stage was sacred and how actors should respect the stage and hence be serious about the content they bring into the space. And William raised his glass and said, "But do you know the reason you stand on that stage?" I said, "To perform." "But who is it for?" he asked. "For the audience, I guess." I said, not knowing where this was going. "And why is this important?" William asked. "Why? What do you mean?" Another actor joined in, and William explained. Because the audience could have chosen to stay home and watch TV. They could have gone shopping or watched a movie or eaten dinner with friends. But they chose to come to the theatre, some of them from far away, by bus, by train, and brave the traffic to come to the theatre and spend 2 hours of their precious life with you, on you. Do you know how privileged that is? We were silent. I think we must have known this, but none of us would usually place so much weight on this fact. Then William continued, "That is why you must not give the audience anything less than your very best." Fast forward many years. I was at a stage in my career researching actor training methodologies, and William's words began to make sense to me. If I truly appreciate my audience, if I must not give them anything less than my best, and if I can train to become better than what I am now, there is absolutely no reason for me not to train. In other words, I've come to realize that when actors train, it is not merely for themselves, but for the audience, who are the very reason for their existence. Actor training is an existential action. Some of you may think that I'm really exaggerating this, but that was the lesson I've learned, and that is how I would like to understand it. How could nostalgia be valuable to the future? Let's come back to this. There are, of course, many more lessons I've learned in the past 30 years, especially during the 90s, and many more teachers in my life. May Wong, Goh Boon Teck, Kheng Ong Keng Sen, Robin Loon, Casey Lim, and Bogart Tadashi Suzuki, and the list goes on. Now, how could nostalgia be valuable to the future? And here's my offer. As you reminisce and indulge in a sentimental way, yearning for a bygone era, you may become keenly aware of how you are shaped by what you have learned. This is because there was an emotional connection between you and the people who have shared. In the same way, we are also emotionally connected to the people of the future. So what nostalgia could really do is teach us about the now. So look around you now, as an artist living and working now. Look at your co-workers, look at your audience. Whose lives are you touching now? Because that will be the future you help to write. Before I end, I really want to thank Center 42, SIFA, and the audience for this chance to revisit the 90s. Through this nostalgic trip back to my younger self, I have come to remember the fact that I was there when we were writing the roots, drafting the playbook of Singapore theatre today, and I am extremely proud of that. So, thank you.
In junior college, I played tennis. I auditioned for the choir. I got in, but it clashed with tennis, so the choir had to go. I did a lot of school plays in MGS, and when I went to NUS, I did hall plays. The one that sticks in my mind is a musical called Rumble Park by Temasek Hall. That was one of the first few times when I felt so excited to be on stage and experience that thrill. And I was hooked. Then I thought to myself, I can do this. And then I read an audition notice in section 2 of the Straits Times. A few friends and I went to this audition for the musical, 21st January 1994, section 2, What's On? Wanted, full-time singers and actors aged 18 to 40 who are able to rehearse for 6 weeks before the performance from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. Shows to be staged from May 27 to 31st, 1994. Bring along non-returnable photograph. I think I had an extra bus pass photo. Mind you, the last time I auditioned for anything was for the school choir and for the hall musical. I don't know what possessed me to think that I could audition for a professional musical. Maybe it was possession. Anyway, I went with a few friends from Temasek Hall to the Fort Canning Drama Centre Rehearsal Room 1 for the auditions, which turned out, thanks to Dr. Robin Loon's fact-checking, not to be where it happened. According to the open call, it was at the Fort Canning Black Box Music Room where theatre works used to be. I could have sworn it was at the Drama Centre Rehearsal Room 1, but anyway, it was at the Fort Canning vicinity. There was a singing audition, a dancing audition, and I can't remember if I had to prepare an acting piece as well. And it was 29 years ago. Gosh, my very first professional acting gig was 29 years ago. So, none of my other friends got selected. I did. And that was the first time that I met Emma Yong. Anyone here remembers Emma Yong? Emma and I were in the corners. Emma had just finished her A-levels, and I was in my first year in NUS, majoring in theatre studies and English language. Does anyone know what the name of the musical was? Or not all, is it? Kampong Amber. And there we met and became friends with Tan King Hua, who also got a start in professional theatre in a musical playing a singing and dancing cabaret girl called Daisy. Fast forward to 1994, Emma and I singing and dancing at the Kallang Theatre with the likes of Nora Samosian, Tan King Hua, Adrian Pang, Glenn Bui, Ko Ching Man, in a musical written by Catherine Lim and Dick Lee. On the second night of Kampong Amber, President Ong Teng Cheong and Mrs. Ong came to watch us, and I quote, "If the creators of Kampong Amber hope to capture the idyllic and slow rhythms of Kampong life through music and movement, they have succeeded on every count. The unhurried and natural movements of the cast in Kampong scenes, with its authentic sets, certainly evoked a sense of nostalgia. The Peranakan setting, conceptualized by actor-director Glenn Bui and composer Dick Lee, gives the musical a strong cultural identity." Unquote. Pan Min Yen, 30th May 1994. Everyone was singing this little song. In every village by the sea, there stands a tall and ancient tree that shelters from the sky above, a tree of hope, a tree of love. It shares our joy and feels our pain. It grows with us through sun and rain. It stays so green the whole year through, and flowers when a dream comes true. Bunga sayang, bunga sayang, you are heaven's own work of art. Bunga sayang, bunga sayang, gentle flower of the heart. Cha, cha, cha. Choreography by Najib Ali. I was 19 years old when I performed in Kampong Amber, and I was so lucky to have been in that musical. And another musical too, that you may have heard of, called Chang and Eng, staged by a theatre company called Action Theatre that was housed right here in 42 Waterloo Street. The artistic director of Action Theatre and the director of Chang and Eng the musical was someone called Ekachai Erong Tham. Anyone heard of him? Yeah. Okay, well, he makes films now. And if you didn't hear about him, don't worry. The Thais will say, Mike and Rai. Anyway, I didn't get the big parts. I was always in the chorus, but as some of us will know, the chorus always have the most fun. I was also in a musical version of Adrian Tan's The Teenage Textbook, and for that I got to play the lead, and that was also a lot of fun. And that was one of the best things about my life as an actor in the 90s. I had lots of fun. Most of the time because I really did not know what being an actor entailed. I just went for auditions and I did what needed to be done. But I learned so many things. It was like an explosion of the self. And so many new selves were created. A new thing emerged every time I took on a project. And it really helped that I was a university student with an extremely flexible timetable. I really think that it gave me breadth and space to be so open to new things. Had time to think and not be too concerned about chasing the next production. Nothing I did in the 90s was part of a larger and deliberate career plan. I just followed where the auditions led me, and there were so few auditions. 1 year after Kampong Amber, I went to audition for a play produced by The Necessary Stage, directed by Kok Heng Luan, Guo Qing Liang, and written by Hua Siren, Ke Siren, and it was called Invisibility, 世中隐者, and it was in Mandarin. Wanted young Mandarin-speaking adults from 21 to 27 to audition for a play to be staged in November. Please call 733-2716. Okay. Thanks to my diligent mother, I had quite solid training in English and Mandarin, so I was fairly conversant in English and Mandarin. But doing an entire play in Mandarin was was something else. So I ran to the NUS library and dug out this old dusty book containing audition notices in Chinese. But they were all in traditional script. So I had to transcribe all the traditional script of Fan Ti Zi into simplified script, the Jian Ti. I wrote it all down on pieces of paper, I borrowed the book, I took it with me to the audition. Okay, I think this one was at the drama center. Okay, maybe it was at 126K now, I don't know. Anyway, never mind. I went for the audition and I memorized from the simplified Chinese transcript that I had written on the piece of paper, remember? I sandwiched it between the pages, I was revising from it, and then Kheng caught sight of me holding this old dusty book. I delivered my audition piece in the best Mandarin that I knew how, and at the end of the audition, Kheng was so intrigued by the old dusty book I brought to the audition, and he kept asking me, where did you find this? And when he opened the pages and all my transcribed pages fell out, he looked at me and said, you did all this? And I said, yes. And he smiled at me in that Kheng smile, and he continued to fuss over that old dusty book. Later, he sat me down and said, okay, I can't actually tell you what the part is going to be because it's not written yet. But I would like you to come on board and be part of the ensemble to help devise this piece. It will be a long process, possibly 12 months, but we will provide training and we will work on and off. The play will still be in Mandarin. Also, the subject matter will be quite adult. Are you okay with it? So he's telling me, all of 21 years old, that the part was not yet written. We will have to undergo training and workshopping for around 12 months. And the part is about sexual fetishes between strangers. And was I okay with it? I replied, sure. Well, was I insane? Maybe. Was I possessed? Very possibly. But I said yes. Mind you, this is fresh off the all-singing, all-dancing extravaganza that was Kampung Ember. And I'm now into the alternative scene. And it was all so underground and so alternative that it's not even written yet. And that began an incredible journey of discovery and training. I worked with Ang Ye Bin of Theatre Ops, Lao Yu Ju Chang, who tried to teach an incredulous 21-year-old that she should breathe like a hollow tube. Or was it that my body was a hollow tube and then let the breath go from the toes to the head? I didn't ask because I was trying to be the hollow tube. I did my best. And I remember that I only passed out once when Ye Bin conducted the exercise. Another day, we were meant to have training, but when I arrived, she said, 我们去看戏好吗? I don't remember what theatre we watched, but I think it was children's theatre. Casey Lim will know about my fainting spells. I fainted once during a rehearsal of Hungry in 1998, and it scared the hell out of him. I am convinced that that is why, when he cast me in PIE in 1999, he made me sit on a chair behind a screen the entire performance. No fainting for you. Fainting or no fainting, nothing was wasted. Every encounter was an opportunity, even though at that time, I couldn't understand it all. But I embraced it. I learned to trust myself with it. I remember going to the beginner's theatre at the substation when the space was being set up for invisibility, and I was so blown away by how the space had been transformed. The ambience was so seedy. This was also the first and last time that I ever smoked in a play, I think. And I quote, if playwright Hua Si-ren had wanted to warn his audience that there is little meaning in his life, and he succeeded. He amused and embarrassed his audience with portrayals of unthinking acts, an actor's obsession with his navel, another ceaselessly inspecting her acne, and yet another mindlessly chewing of bananas. Observations culled from real habits. Unquote. Jason Liao, 20th August 1996. And in the same review, I'm sharing this because I was quite proud of my Mandarin, and Jason Liao quotes, Chen's crisp diction and nuanced delivery were the most impressive, immersed fully in her thrill-seeking and shopping jaded persona. Yes! It must be the hollow tubes. Robin Loon asked me why I said yes to this project. why do past perfect? I thought about it and I replied, I guess I'm doing this because I'm looking to be surprised. I must say, my experiences, my training, and working in the 90s have really spoiled me. I was exposed to a barrage of ridiculous experimentations that not many today in their right minds would agree to. And yet, I and some of my colleagues here will tell you, not only did we agree to them, we built a lot of ourselves on them. Old habits die hard. Having gone through all that mayhem in the 90s, I would say that I'm still living for the surprises. Still living to try to breathe like a holiday. Every breath taking its journey from my toes to my head. Passing out because of the intensity, but always fully aware and fully committed. I guess the real surprise I have found throughout this process of past perfect is that I've not given up completely.
I don't know. I'm still not happy with it. I think it's not funny enough.
You didn't write a comedy, that's why.
What I'm saying is maybe I should have.
This sounds like it's going to be even more unreal.
You see, maybe it's better to make a joke out of it all. Levity for gravity. I want to make them laugh, get them entertained. Yes, I want them to get their guard down, and then when they're really enjoying themselves, they may suddenly realize that this is not funny after all.
I don't know if it's right to make fun of it.
It won't get us into trouble, I hope.
Come on, guys, don't be paranoid. Nobody's been jailed for writing a play before.
But I don't wish to be the one setting the precedent.
But there is another problem with the play. More fundamental. An inherent paradox in the premise of the paradox.
A paradox.
Yes. You see, the play is saying that they don't tolerate dissent, right?
Well, yes.
Is this play an example of dissent?
It is critical of them, no doubt about it. Yes, I would say so.
So let's, for argument's sake, consider this possible scenario. Let's say they allow our play to be performed.
You mean they don't censor it?
Yes. That would demonstrate that they are not intolerant of the dissent. And since the play's premise is that they are intolerant, the premise would fail if we let it through.
Yes, but what if they don't allow it to be staged?
By censoring the play, which is an example of dissent, that would be shown to be intolerant of dissent. So the play's premise would be borne out.
Exactly. So the play's premise works.
Not quite.
I'm hungry.
Can we go for lunch now? Wait. You see, if the play is banned, there will be no play to speak of. And if there is no play, then there is no premise. So
if the play's premise is right, then the play will not exist. And then there will be no such thing as this premise.
right. In a nutshell, we have this. If the play is staged, it is meaningless because it does not reflect the truth. And if the play is not staged, it becomes useless as a play because a play must, by definition, be staged before it becomes a play.
We are stuck with a play which makes no sense either way. A paradox!
Yes.
Since everyone is in agreement, does that mean now we can go for lunch? In September 1999, I performed in a play called Peti Kayu Ibu Ku. It was based on a Mandarin play written by Nelson Chia, translated into English by the late Ho Pao Kun. The Malay version was transcreated by Alfian Saad from Pao Kun's English version, and that was the last theatre contact I had with Pao Kun. But Pao Kun shaped my theatre experiences in the 90s. And in tribute to Peti Kayu Ibu Ku, today I am doing Peti Kayu Ibu Mu. And instead of taking things out of the chest, I am putting things in it. In 1992, still a second year in Victoria Junior College, I was in my first Malay production with Theatre Kami at the substation. I didn't act in. Despite receiving the jury's special award at Kemuning's Youth Theatre Festival, much like SYF for JC and Pilu Centre, I chose to assist at stage manager. Not stage manager, but assisting Adli Mosbit, who was stage manager. A part of me probably felt very insecure because the rest of the young cast were all damn talented. But maybe I also didn't want to act because I didn't want to be directed by Oniatta Effendi back then, who I was dating. Now, to be honest, we were not prepared for the response to Anak Melayu. There were many articles about Anak Melayu on Berita Harian and the newspaper. Citing dismay and disappointment in the Malay youth, us, for putting up such a thing. I was genuinely surprised and a bit disappointed because clearly the Malay community was not ready for a play like Anak Melayu. And what were we? Just a bunch of young people with a lot to say. So we said, lihat apa yang telah terjadi. Sudah berlaku. Yang anehnya, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan duduk saja. Rasa marah, rasa sedih, rasa tersinggung. Tetapi, duduk situ aja. Tak masuk akal. Sebagai seorang remaja, saya sedih melihat kebodohan si dewasa. Tidak bertanggungjawab. Semuanya gila. Semuanya gila. Now we were told that the ISD was following us. We never verified it, or we didn't have concrete evidence, but my mother, she warned me about this. And she told me not to step out of the house. Kau jangan nak keluar dari rumah, she said. We had no evidence, but I was paranoid. Every time I stepped out of the house, I was wondering if I was being followed. Was anyone watching? Now please remember, I was way back then 18 when this happened. Thinking back, I think I was traumatized. And that trauma probably stays on till today. I mean, we were the Anak Melayu, the young artists that had put so much of ourselves into this process. The cast had created characters that were so close to ours or our peers' experiences, and it was hard to distance from them. And it was hard to de-roll from these characters. That was trauma too, because the actors represented a segment of Malay youths whom we felt were left behind. That was then. Now this is now. How much has changed? I also wonder. Now Fendi and I met Pao Kun at the Drama Centre on Fort Canning, and he asked us, why do you do what you do? We spoke about how as young Malays we wanted to find our voices through and in the theatre. And his reminder to us was to never forget what we said that night. At 18, what would we ever know or imagine to be our identities? Malay identity. Apart from being Anak Melayu, what were we? But I always remember what PK had said to us. It's a bit odd, but PK is what I call him, like Pao Kun, PK. Okay? I was at NIE getting my degree as a teacher, and I've always been so blessed with so many teachers who have guided me. I had worked with the late Alex Abishkanadan in this production called Masters of Ward C, which was mentioned earlier, and a parody of Masters of the Sea, which was huge back then, when Margaret Chan would say, "I would crush you like a cockroach." Remember? Nobody remembers this? I was surrounded by giants in the literary and theatre scene. Max Leblond, Kirpal Singh, Catherine Lim, Rani Murthy, and Gopal Puri. These were my teachers. Now in this production, Masters of Ward C, I was part of the ensemble, playing a nurse. Very small role, but such a big, joyous time. I was never made to feel small or uncomfortable when I worked with these legends and learned so much by simply being there and being present. I was recruited from NIE after a year 4 device showcase under PK called The Day My Grandfather's Bird Died. For this play, Pakun devised exercises like taking a bus ride 10 times over. I saw the same nurse taking the bus, going for her shift and boarding it after her shift ended to go home. At that time, I never knew why I did this. And like a lot of people who worked with Pakun, we just did what he told us to. Reflecting back on that now, I realized that Pakun wanted me to appreciate stillness while in motion and to find meaning in the mundane. Now, he had another favorite exercise, which is to bring your favorite song. And in that moment, I brought my favorite song, a spiritual Indonesian song. And it was about how God sees everything, and yet we continue to clothe ourselves in lies. He loved it so much, and he asked me to perform it for him in The Day My Grandfather's Bird Died. It goes like this. Dialah satu yang maha melihat, Dialah satu yang maha mendengar, tiada guna menutupi sembunyi dari kuasanya. You know what? I'm not sure, but I think Pakun didn't understand a single word of it. But he told me he loved it. And he's always closing his eyes when I sing. So I also don't know if he was awake or he was sleeping. Now, moving on to Geylang People in the Net, which was my first professional production at the Victoria Theatre. The last time I was at VT was part of a school musical, and I was a 14-year-old playing a dancing general in The Wizard of Oz. Pakun created exercises to explore Geylang. And I went to Geylang for field work purposes at night. I visited the red light district, and it was through this production that I learned about odd and even numbered boroughs and the division of Geylang into Chinese Geylang and the Malay Geylang divided by Lebar MRT station. Some of the cast were given tasks to explore food in Geylang. Some of us were tasked to explore the sex industry. Can you guess which task this tudung-clad 23-year-old NIE undergraduate got? Of course, fate would have it. Sex. Was I worried? Not at all. Not until I was approached by a pakcik in one of those even-numbered boroughs, and he came right up to me and asked me, "Berapa?" All I did was stand there waiting for my male cast members to get some sound bites and have a peek at the fishbowl setup of sex workers, which was I was not allowed to go in. So I just stood there. Backpack, beige colour tudung, and walking around the red light district in Geylang. For the record, the pakcik was very disappointed. Now we move on to my Dato' Raja experience. But first, I must explain to you what is Dato' Raja. It is a nightclub, exclusively for Malay clientele. Let me illustrate the spatial mise-en-scène of this establishment. Now over here, there is a DJ console that looks like a pawn shop. P-A-W-L, you all. I know it's Geylang, so you're easily confused. So this pawn shop, imagine there are bars like this, yeah, metal bars in front of the display case, and over here is the turntable and the console. And I want you to hear with me the Western rock songs the DJ played that night. Shout to the heart, and you're too bad, baby, you give love a bad name. Now, soon after that rock song ends, the live band on this side breaks into a traditional song. Menari, hidupkan hati Tuhan sambil menyanyi. Okay, I suppose you're wondering, how is this tudung-clad undergraduate? How did she even get into Datuk Raja? I was hiding in the toilet because I wanted to hear the conversations and of course all that music. To blend in, I wore a turtleneck top so I could fit in. But I also remember I wore a beret, macam Emily in Paris, but this one is Oniatta in Geylang. Now listening to the conversations between Mak Ayam, Mama San, and her anak-anak ayam on how to dance with these pakcik on the floor, it took me back to the text of Anak Melayu. That excerpt I read at the beginning of this segment, that Anak Melayu was present in Datuk Raja. Now I also observed a Versace shirt on this pakcik with big rings, sitting on a circular armchair like this, both arms outstretched, dispensing money to his runners. This play was my first experience with other cast members speaking different languages. Aku hanya mahu sebuah sungai untuk Geylang, bersama pohon-pohon dan rumput rampai di tepi sungai itu. Dan aku hanya mahu ibuku di bawah sebuah pohon di tepi sungai, mendekapku di dadanya sambil derita tentang sebuah pulau. Di pulau itu terdapat sebuah gunung yang tinggi dan sebuah danau yang dalam. Di situ terdapat binatang-binatang yang tercantik, burung-burung yang tercantik, dan ikan-ikan yang tercantik di dunia. Tetapi tiada yang menyentuh binatang-binatang, burung-burung, dan ikan-ikan ini. Di situ, semua yang mereka lakukan hanya bernyanyi, berenang, dan bermain sepanjang hari.
我只希望牙龙能有一条长长的河流，河的两岸有绿绿的草地，有高高的树。我希望有妈妈在树下把我抱在怀里，跟我讲故事。故事里有一个小岛，有一座高山，有一个大湖，那里有世界上最美的飞鸟，最美的野兽，最美的鱼虾。但是没有人去打猎、捕鱼、抓鸟，他们一天到晚只会游泳、唱歌、玩耍。
I was a full-time teacher by this time. So as soon as my day ends in school around 5 o'clock, I head to the theatre for rehearsals. And rehearsals would end at around 11, then we continue to eat at S11. Do you know what S11 is? It was a small eating place next to the original National Library at Stamford Road. Many actors ate there late at night because we had to rush to rehearsals. There were halal options, non-halal options, but this place no longer exists. Though I remember how hungry actors and techies were nourished right there. I also worked with an actor who came from Taiwan, and the working language was Mandarin in Sunset Rise, although the Taiwanese Mandarin kind of sounded very different from what I was familiar with. In that same production, I worked with very experienced actors like Sasi, Johnny, Ramesh, Jean. Some days I didn't understand what was being said between the actors, but I didn't feel excluded. In fact, I picked up a couple of phrases in Mandarin, and then when they were all going on in Mandarin, I would just nudge Johnny and ask him, "Hey, Johnny." He would turn to me and ask him, "Johnny, listen some more." Sometimes he would give me a translation and I understand, but sometimes he would give me this look, and I will know that it was very intense. Now that's the level of comfort and respect I experienced in that production. Everyone honored each other's diverse backgrounds, language, race, culture. It was something I never saw or experienced in the theatre. Everything felt so organic. I never even noticed that one time I placed my hand in Wat Kian's mouth to pull out a fishbowl, which was a device moment that was eventually scripted. I saw nothing to it until Alfian Saad's review about how that was quite a beautiful gesture and a testament that there were no boundaries. Now, when we were devising the script, Kun asked all the actors what sort of funeral we wanted for ourselves, which then became our character's final narrative. Kalau saya pergi, saya mahu pergi malam Jumaat lepas maghrib. Kalau saya pergi, tolong telefon kawan-kawan saya, anak saya, supaya mereka dapat menziarahi saya untuk kali terakhir. Esok paginya mandikanlah saya dan bungkuskanlah badan saya dengan kain kapan yang putih dan bersih. Bas jenazah tu nanti bawa saya ke pusara aman di Lim Chu Kang. Kat situ, tolong jangan menangis. Kerana setiap detik air mata akan memberatkan pemergian saya. Saya cuma minta disedekahkan surah Al-Fatihah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yaumiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. I get emotional reading this today, 24 years after we performed it. Maybe because I'm older, some of us are caring for our elderly parents. Looking back, I realized what Kun did was to honor each and every actor's contribution, what we brought to the space, our language, our faith, our beliefs, our voices. It is 1999. I am back in the substation. You all know substation or not? Guinness Theatre? Now no more. My first and only one-women show called Patikayu Ibuku. I was, 25 years old. I was so proud of this production. You know, every actor wants to own the stage. If they say they don't, they are bluffing. The only thing that made me so proud, the other thing that made me so proud of the show was this. My mother, she didn't like my being in the theatre, but she usually turns up, and her usual response when asked, Mom, how was the theatre? Best ah? And her response would be, okay lah. However, at the end of Patikayu Ibuku, my mother, seated at Guinness Theatre, could not stop crying. She said it reminded her of her life as a stepdaughter. She lost her mother when she was 3 months old and had little recollection of her birth mother. Childhood was a very painful one where there was abuse and neglect. So to watch a play about the relationship between mother and daughter was quite traumatic and must have been cathartic. Now, quick synopsis. The play is about a daughter opening a wooden chest and taking items out that belonged to her late mother. Every item she removed triggered a memory and a lot of pain. Now, the play ended with a symbolic bearing of the past, with sand flowing from the cracks from the ceiling, masterfully controlled by the petite but talent extraordinaire Ginger Lee. Now Oniatta is putting her memories into this chest and sharing it with you before she closes. And of course, that final song. Jiwa melanda hatiku, tersusun nada, irama dan lagu. Walau hanya sederhana, tetapi tak mengapa. Moga dapat instan hilang irama dan lagu bagaikan kembang sentiasa bermadu andai dipisah lagu dan irama lemah tiada berjiwa hampa.
As someone who has a true and deep love for the theatre, sitting here and being privy to the stories that these artists have had to share is really such a privilege. I hope that their palpable passion and love for the craft and the obstacles that they face, the hard work that they've put in, truly inspires you to support the Singapore art scene as it changes and grows. Looking to the past is therapeutic. It's healing. For my mom, her beginnings in the theatre were a fundamental part of who she is, and it's been awe-inspiring to hear about that in depth. It brought us together in a way that was intimate, because for both of us, and perhaps for many other people here, theatre is our first love. And that's a shared experience that is extremely special. Like I said at the start of my segment, my first experience with her work in the 90s was a reading of the trilogy at Esplanade, of which my favourite play is Mergers and Accusations. I would love to share this beautifully written scene with you, with me taking on the role of Ellen Toh, a role that my mother fell deeply in love with, and Auntie Serene, could you read the part of Leslie? And Auntie Oniatta, could you read the stage directions?
Please don't call me auntie. Act 2, Scene 2. Ellen's office. It should be obvious that she's now a partner and that the office is more opulent than the old office. Ellen is at her desk working. She has her glasses on. The desk lamp is on, indicating that it is late at night. Leslie knocks on the door and comes in.
Ellen?
Hi. I didn't know you were still here. Seems like you've been spending more time in our offices than your own these last few weeks.
Ellen turns down to her work, looking tired and unhappy. Leslie hesitates, wondering whether to go or not.
Look, have you had something to eat?
No.
Let me take you out to dinner.
I don't think I ought to.
Why?
Leslie indicates her desk.
Will you be able to finish all that tonight?
No.
Then why not take a break? Come back to it in the morning refreshed.
Ellen has taken out a fresh cigarette and is tapping it, unlit, on the table. Leslie leans over and lights it, cupping Ellen's hands to do so.
Relax a bit.
I'm not sure I will.
Maybe I wouldn't want you to. Not entirely.
Are you always this direct?
I find it wastes a great deal of time and energy to pretend. Don't you prefer directness?
No, I've not been known to be subtle for the most part.
But you prefer to set the pace.
Maybe.
And you'd rather some things about yourself remain private.
After a long silence, as Ellen debates whether to deny Leslie's implication.
Is that unreasonable?
My guess would be that no one knows except Mrs. Okada, who, from the little contact I've had with her, appears to be the sort of person whom nothing would faze.
I appreciate that you may be used to a certain level of directness where you come from, but
Ellen, at the risk of sounding naive and simplistic, being in the closet is being in the closet wherever you are.
I think I would rather not continue this conversation.
What are you afraid of?
Are you kidding? Do you really need to ask me that? Don't you know how people talk behind your back?
Well, they're quite willing to talk in front of me too.
And it doesn't bother you.
Sometimes, though I know it shouldn't.
Well, it bothers me.
You realize that no one can threaten you with the exposure of something you willingly disclose.
It's different here. I don't expect you to understand.
Try me.
I've seen the mask of polite distaste come over the faces of people I thought were my friends, enough to know that complete openness is not an option.
People are usually uncomfortable with something they don't understand.
Well, I don't see why I should be the one to educate them.
Well, if you don't, who's going to?
There is a long pause as Ellen lets the ash build up on her cigarette. Leslie gently takes it from her and puts it out.
Have you thought about quitting?
Many times. God, if only I could. Haven't you?
A little. But not very seriously. Don't think I could live without this.
This. Aren't you presuming?
You tell me, am I?
How did you know?
I didn't. I'm taking an educated risk.
Educated.
Based on the once-over you gave me and the look on your face that first evening.
Did I really give you a once-over?
You mean it wasn't conscious? I'm disappointed.
Ellen is silent.
You'll be telling me next that you missed the once-over I gave you.
No.
You're very attractive.
I also happen to be married.
What?
But what?
I'm sorry, it was a stupid assumption on my part.
What?
That it was a marriage of convenience.
You'll have to ask John about that. I imagine there are days he finds me extremely inconvenient.
I'm afraid I don't understand.
You're not the only one.
It's just that I thought
I was interested.
Are you?
I...
But you don't cheat on your husband, is that what you're saying?
No, I mean... He would know. Assuming...
Assuming? Is there someone else?
I was seeing someone for a while, but it wasn't anything serious.
I see. You lead an interesting life, Miss Toe.
Sometimes I think my interesting life leads me.
Denial of responsibility, that's always convenient.
What about your girlfriend?
You mean Sue, my imaginary English girlfriend?
Imaginary.
Well, you have to admit she's a convenient way to introduce the fact that I'm gay. I must have spent a full week of tube rides figuring that one out. You know how it is, trying to write the manual on 101 ways to break the news to your loved ones.
No, I don't.
The fact is, I'm looking for my John, who would be female, of course.
Of course.
And if I found her, that would be it. I would stop looking.
Unlike me.
At the risk of sounding naive and simplistic again, it's a question of knowing what you want.
And you do.
And finding it.
Which you do.
Not always. But then again, sometimes what I want finds me.
There is a long, taut silence. Ellen breaks away to rub her eyes behind her glasses. Leslie reaches over and takes the glasses off.
Stop. That's bad for you.
You seem to have a lot of bad habits. And I can't seem to give any of them up.
Bringing Leslie's hand to her face.
Do you want to?
Looking at Leslie and answering the unasked question.
Very much.
See.
I am Lao Tzu, the ninth born. In Hokkien, they call me Gao Kia or Lao Gao, which also sounds like old monkey. Some deliberately pronounce wrongly and it becomes like old dog. So, although I was born a pig, I'm sometimes also a monkey and a dog. That's why my school friends say I'm extra super animalistic. My proper name was given by Master Tan. It sounds very civilized. Yo Wei, meaning got achievement. You know why? Because my father was a laborer, a manual worker. He wants his son to make good achievements. He even wants me to emulate that famous Chinese reformer scholar Kheng Youwei. But there is a problem. Because my surname is Cheng, or Zhuang in Mandarin. And Zhuang can mean act, pretend. Which means I sound like someone who acts like or pretends to be like the great Kheng Youwei. Basket. All my school friends make fun of me. They say my father ex-Ebola. Want me to act like a great man. I think Lao Jiu sounds good. Because I am my father's ninth born. In Hokkien, we call the ninth son Dao Kia.